What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I am an herbalist and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. Thank you so much, as always. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this video at all. Thank you for sending it to a friend. Thank you for hitting my Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. If this is helpful to you and you like it, then that is super helpful to me as a little reciprocity there. It could be cute. Thank you for listening to the music on Spotify, Tidal, Pandora. Thank you for hitting up the Patreon, where you can find an Astro Basics course if you want to better understand these kinds of forecasts and YouTube astrologers and this kind of thing. Then I have an Astro Basics course for you. Thank you for being here. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. So this week we have the full moon in Gemini. So the full moon in Gemini is obviously closely conjunct Mars retrograde. And Mars retrograde, of course, is and the full moon by its nature is opposite to the sun. So there's big, loud energy there. We've been sort of seeing the volume increase for some time around that. You know, I've been thinking about this Mars retrograde a lot recently. There's no not thinking about it. But, this one, it's kind of, Mars retrograde is just kind of annoying this time, more than like terrifying the way that Mars retrograde can be. One of the things that I can see here with this Mars in Gemini is Mars in Gemini, it receives this overcoming square from Jupiter in Pisces. So Jupiter is earlier in the zodiac than Mars is, and therefore able to, in a superior position, able to sort of exert influence over that Mars in an important way. So Jupiter, of course, is the planet of joy, luck, abundance, the greater benefic, the one who wants things to go well and to look at improvement and this kind of thing. So Jupiter isn't in charge of this Mercury and can't just like make him do, or Mars, and Jupiter isn't in charge of this Mars and can't just make Mars do whatever he wants him to do. But this is not Mars retrograde just wilding out here. You know what I mean? The other thing is that this Mars retrograde gets a lovely trine from Saturn in Aquarius the whole time, basically. So the whole time that Mars is in Gemini, this whole eight month period that goes all the way to March of 2023, that whole period of time, we've got Saturn in an overcoming trine to Mars. Again, overcoming, this looks like it has an ability to exert some influence here. A trine aspect is generally helpful and supportive. It's stabilizing in some kind of way. So the Mars retrograde, which is also squared in Neptune and Pisces and therefore confusing or delusional or overly imaginative, muddled, confounded, these kinds of things, right? And the Neptune stuff is absolutely coming through here. And a retrograde in a Mercury sign is going to be like confused by its nature, right? Mercury is the planet who wants to do like the thinky stuff. It wants to be intelligible. It wants to be understandable, communicable, this sort of thing. That's what Mercury does. And so Gemini and Virgo stuff will sort of like tend in that direction. And so a retrograde, where we're moving backwards, where that stuff isn't able to move forward, that sort of stuff becomes confused. It's turned on its head a little bit, right? So things are definitely confusing here. There's not a lot of understanding taking place, but there are some strong protections in place here. So the sun, for example, is in Sagittarius, and opposite to Mars. So the sun doesn't like being opposite to Mars. It's a bummer for the sun. That's a difficult position and all this. But then, we can look and be like, okay, well, the sun is also in this lovely sextile to Saturn. So Saturn is stabilizing and helpful and complementary to that sun situation. So the sun opposite Mars, that might be like angry or volatile, wants to throw things or this kind of thing, right? But Saturn, that's going to want to slow it down. That's going to want to bring some stability or something like this. Saturn, the sun in Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter and also square to Jupiter. So the sun is in an overcoming position to Jupiter, but because Jupiter rules that sun, we're not really concerned about that much. Again, Jupiter is in position to help here. Jupiter can see both of these planets. Also, Saturn can see both of these planets and be like, okay, well, like, there's a lot going on here, but like, let's cool it out. Let's think about things. This reminds me of one of my favorite thinkers is Bayoko Malafe, right? And so I always return to his question, what if our response to the crisis is part of the crisis? You've probably heard me talk about that a lot of times. He also said one time, in these urgent times, we must slow down. And I think that that's really, really resonant here. So Mars is definitely going to speak to urgency, emergency, this sort of thing, right? I love to talk about Mars as being motivating in the uncomfortable kind of way. It's the tack in the chair. If you sit down and you find a tack in your chair, you're getting up immediately, right? It's super motivating, but it's uncomfortable, right? That's the way that Mars likes to work. And so there's this urgency here. A lot of times with Mars, with Mars, we can think about red stuff. We can think about fire. Think about fire trucks, for example, right? So like there's a fire. It's an urgent situation, and so we're gonna go screaming down the road, and with the bright lights and all, like a commotion, right? Very urgent moment that requires a lot of rushing and this kind of thing, right? So Bayo Komolafe, with this quote, "In these urgent times, we must slow down," sort of flips that on its head, right? And then we can think about Saturn here. We can think about Jupiter here as well, right? Jupiter is very much about the big picture. We can think about wisdom and meaning and, coherence. That's a really good Jupiter word here. And then slowing down, that's a Saturn idea here, right? So Saturn is very much sort of, slow and steady wins the race. Mars wants to be the hare, right? Mars will run, and then maybe get tired and this kind of thing. Whereas Saturn is like one step at a time, and I will get there when I get there, but I'm going to continuously push myself to get there, right? That's the way that Saturn likes to operate. So we see that there's something here about wisdom, meaning, coherence, the big picture, and slowing down that has a lesson or has something helpful to offer to Mars and the Sun, who are currently in a moment where they're beefing. So indeed, in these urgent times, we must slow down. One of the other things that is happening this week is we also see that Venus and Mercury are moving from Sagittarius into Capricorn. So this is really helpful for them in a lot of ways. In the first place, Mercury is not super comfortable in Sagittarius. Mercury in Sagittarius is, that is said to be in its detriment. It's opposite to Gemini, which Mercury rules. It is therefore as far from home as possible. This is a situation where Mercury is not super comfortable in this space. A lot of times Mercury in Sagittarius will overdo it. It'll, it'll be like a word vomit kind of situation. There's all of these words. There's so much going on, this kind of thing. It over communicates, overshares, this kind of thing, right? So for Mercury to move into Capricorn, I actually really like Mercury in Capricorn. It's not like traditionally dignified or anything like this. You're not going to hear Serapio talking about how great Mercury in Capricorn is. But I personally really like Mercury in Capricorn because there's something that is really practical and useful about the way that Mercury likes to think about things or likes to organize information with Mercury in Capricorn. So this is a dignity shift that is helpful for Mercury, and we can recall that Mercury is ruling that Mars in Gemini. So Mercury, who is ruled by Saturn, right? Mercury in Capricorn ruled by Saturn. So there's something here that wants to slow it down in order to be more practical or utilitarian, useful in some kind of way, right? So already we see that Mars doesn't like having the brakes put on like this. However, and so, in these urgent times, we must slow down. It's not easy to slow down when there's a fire burning, right? It's not when there's an emergency situation. That's a big time to panic, right? But if you panic, you lose your ability to make good decisions. And so in these urgent times, we must slow down. Mercury finds the ability to slow down with that rulership from Saturn. And Mars, it helps to harness that Mars. It helps to keep that Mars from going completely crazy. And I super appreciate that in a Mars retrograde. Also this week, we've got Venus moving out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn as well. So this also puts Venus under Saturn rulership. And so this is going to sort of start to slow things down and think into Saturn. Again, we are looking at a super strong Saturn right now. And now through the rest of the time that Saturn is in Aquarius, we've got a really nice looking Saturn. So if you are looking for ways of organizing or managing the infrastructure of your relationship or your business or whatever it is, now is a really good time to lean into that. And remember that even if there's a fire that is on right now, sometimes you gotta slow down if you're gonna find a way around the situation so you can actually grab the fire extinguisher so you don't just like break shit on the way and then send the fire extinguisher down the stairs or some shit like that. Anyway, I am out of time. Thank y'all for being here. Check out zambonifong.com. There's a bunch of shit there you might like. Thank you for being here.